So our country is rich in resources. Here we are in this lucky, lucky country. We have oil and gas aplenty. We have huge supplies of the most precious resources of the 21st century, water. We have land and sea resources. We have a quarter of Europe's wind resources, a quarter of its tidal resource, and 1/10 of the wave resources. And we have a skilled and inventive people. Delegates, the Unionist parties tell us we're too poor to be independent. And the only reason that the Tory government in London have set their faces against independence is concern for our welfare. The reality is quite different. The Unionist parties oppose independence not because Scotland is too poor, but because Scotland is rich. What they really fear is the loss of Scottish resources. It's time we put the wealth of this land to the good of our people. Delivered a nation which looks after its own and does good throughout the world. On which very subject, I have some more news for you about Glasgow. As you know, we intend to give Scottish Water a new direction, to become a dynamic player in our economy, to project our humanitarian values around the world. I can announce today that Glasgow has been put on the shortlist, along with South Korea and the United Arab Emirates, to host the 2015 World Water Forum. 30,000 delegates it would bring to this city, indeed to this very conference centre, to try and solve one of the world's biggest challenges. Now, we'll campaign for that prize with the same vigour that brought the Commonwealth Games to this city for 2014. We intend to win it for Scotland. Delegates, we are Scotland's first ever SNP government, and we're standing for re-election. We do so with the best team, the best record, and the only real vision for the future of this country. In the party broadcast last evening, you saw we claimed a record of 20,000 modern apprenticeships, 20,000 individual investments in the future of this country. That was this year's figure. Next year, I fear we can't repeat that. Instead, we've determined on 25,000 apprenticeships, not just another record, but 66% higher than we inherited from Labour in 2007. And today we publish 100 key achievements of your SNP government. The world's leading climate change targets, done. NHS budget protected, it was, it is, it will be. Prescription charges ended. Bridge tolls removed. 1,000 extra police officers achieved. Over 1,000 council houses built. Labour built 6. Council tax frozen, done. A commitment to our infrastructure. A new fourth crossing and 2.5 billion of capital investment. Now, the business of government is a steep learning curve, particularly for a minority government. No doubt we could have done some things better. Yet even in the teeth of world recession, the consequences of Brown's bust, we have still achieved more in 4 years than any other Scottish government, and we have so much yet to do. I wanted Scotland to have our own government so that together we could make Scotland better. I wanted the SNP to form that government so we could serve. I am the First Minister of Scotland. We have plenty still to do. With the people's support, I intend to continue to be First Minister of Scotland. Mind you, it's a miracle that I made it here today at all. This Wednesday, Ed Balls came to Scotland and said that Labour were going to use me as a punch bag. The next day, Ian Gray said he would take me on. He seemed to take exception to me speaking to him calmly, and he got very, very upset. You know, they say they're not scared of the SNP. Well, they're right to be scared. Scared of our record, scared of our team. Scared because so many Scots across all political persuasions want to see this SNP government re-elected. Scared because only the SNP speaks for Scotland, for all of Scotland. Fear leads people to do all sorts of strange things. It's even made Labour reverse its long-standing policy of charging young people for their education. And now, today, they're engaged in council tax gymnastics. Just let's remember, it was Labour who introduced tuition fees north and south of the border, and they've voted against the council tax freeze every year since the SNP took office. Ed Balls doesn't speak for Scotland. He's the man who commissioned the Lord Brown Review, the self-same review that the Tories are now using to impose £9,000 a year fees on English students. He's the man who wrecked the UK economy. He was Gordon Brown's aide-de-camp. He's the man who failed to regulate the banks, a failure he admitted this week. This is a Scottish election for a Scottish Parliament. Ed Balls ain't standing. Neither is Ed Miliband or even Douglas Alexander. Indeed, not even Wendy Alexander standing. Now, they were all on the media circuit this week trying to convince us otherwise. They hope it will distract Scotland from what's actually at stake this coming May. They want to convince us that this election is about enhancing Labour's status at Westminster. But this election is not about who rules in London. It's about who's chosen to serve Scotland. Now, Labour expects that Scotland will do its duty to move slavishly back into line. They don't even think they have to present any ideas. They don't speak for Scotland. They have nothing of significance to say about Scotland. That was true in their long years of government. Did Labour speak for Scotland when they took us into the Iraq War? Did Labour speak for Scotland when they raised the council tax by 60%? Did Labour speak for Scotland when they signed the PFI deals that now cost the public purse £800 million a year? Did Labour speak for Scotland when Alistair Darling promised cuts which were to be deeper and tougher than those of Margaret Thatcher? Did Labour speak for Scotland when they backed the obscenity of nuclear weapons, including £100 billion to be wasted on a new Trident system? Labour didn't stand up for Scotland when they had their chance. Why would they do any better now? A noted Scottish journalist asked recently what Labour stood for apart from cheap booze and higher taxes. Cheap booze and higher council tax. Keir Hardie will be bulling in his grave in Cumnock Cemetery. The Labour Party in Scotland, cheap booze and higher taxes. Has there ever been a more miserable, depressing prospectus ever proffered to the people of this nation? Of course, we know they stand for more jobs, their own. They refused to back the SNP on 25,000 modern apprenticeships. But even as they opposed supporting young people, they wanted plenty of jobs for the boys. I don't think that Scotland wants to go back to Labour's crony state, where helping your pals comes before helping the poor, where a party card is a passport to the cushiest numbers. Remember Strathclyde Passenger Transport, whose Labour-connected officials had to leave in disgrace after an expenses scandal. They were meant to be running the trains. They were too busy operating the gravy train, like so much of Labour in government. The Labour Party speaks for vested interest. The Scottish National Party speaks for all of Scotland. We speak for the poorest Scots, the low-paid pensioners and families who have benefited most from our freeze on the council tax or ending of prescription charges. We speak for the young, delivering the 25,000 apprenticeships that Labour voted against, lowering class sizes, keeping education free. We speak for the vulnerable. We are protecting them with 1,000 extra police officers who have led crime to a 32-year low in Scotland. We speak for the aspirational, the millions of Scots who want a better future for themselves, their children, their grandchildren. We speak for those who want to start their own business. The small business bonus has cut or abolished rates for 80,000 small businesses across Scotland. Labour voted against that as well. We speak for the communities of Lossiemouth and Lookers who have served this country well and who expect some loyalty, not betrayal, in return. Delegates, we speak for all of Scotland, and all of Scotland needs the Scottish National Party. I want to tell you about Nancy. I met her in Kilmarnock High Street 3 weeks ago. I meet lots of folk. It's real politics, listening to real concerns of real people. Nancy's concern was that her disability living allowance would be taken away. That's the thing that allows her to be in a job, to feel useful, wanted, worthwhile. And Nancy was worried, is worried, that her disability allowance will be taken away by the Tory-led coalition at Westminster. She understands that these are hard times, that everyone has to cut their cloth. But she wanted to know why she had to pay so much for a crisis that had nothing to do with her. Now, when I talk real politics, I talk of Nancy, the need for ordinary people to be given a fair shout and a decent chance. She told me of her worries. When she told me, she started to cry. Not tears for herself, but tears of worry, of uncertainty. And I felt concern, and then sympathy, and then anger. Anger at the idea that a group of rich men in a London cabinet could cause such hurt to a woman who overcomes adversity every single day of her life. You see, I'm all for a big society, but I also want a fair society. The late Jimmy Reid didn't learn about a big society on the playing fields of Eton. He learned about a fair society on the shipyards of the Clyde. And I know who had the better education and humanity, and to that concept we shall remain true. In the sense that society should aspire, should try to be as equal as it possibly can be, as in our attitude to education. The widening of the mind is the greatest gift, to learn of the universe and the atoms, of the poets and the philosophers. It's the one real luxury available to all according to their appetite to learn. And it was this nation, who pioneered free education for all, which resulted in Scots inventing and explaining much of the modern world. We called it the Scottish Enlightenment. And out of the educational access came social mobility, as we reached out to all the talents of a nation to change the world for the better. We can do so again. Some of our university principals say that without fees and students we'll fall behind England. We will not. We do not intend to withdraw the state from higher education. Any funding gap will be closed. We would only fail if we were to betray our traditions and mortgage the future. So when it comes to the question of university fees or graduate taxes, I know where I stand. The rocks will melt with the sun before I allow tuition fees to be imposed on Scottish students up front or back door.